Okay, okay.
Welcome to another episode Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Francois.
Yes.
Did I mess it up
Uh,
again?
no, no, it was perfect.
Okay, just
You're
making sure. As soon as I said it and it came out, I was like, I feel like I messed it up. It always happens.
no,
But
no.
dude, please, I'm happy to have you on the show. You're probably one of the first guests I have a lot of questions for. But if you want to introduce yourself to everybody out there.
Okay. So, as you say, my name is Francois. I live in France, and I work at the university where I'm software engineer. I work in a kind of fab lab where I help a student and researcher to problem solve with coding, data sciences, electronic, and I'm also I studied physics and astrophysics when I was younger in the 90s. So I've got a master of science in physics and astrophysics, and I did work 6 years inside a planetarium and inside an observatory where you have a simulation of the night sky, and you try to decipher your position in the universe, and obviously you have questions around about all this.
All right. So one of many questions. President Barack Obama is following you on Twitter. So I was like, look,
Really?
he's studying astrophysics, and or you have it, you have a good understanding of it. And this guy follows you. And I have an astrophysicist friend who's like, Obama knows some things. And a lot of people are probably depressed by the UAP report that we got. That was like 9 pages. And I think the whole alien thing's kind of dropped off a little bit, but I'm still so interested in it because the fabrications of space, just the immense amount of that there is out there to know. And I want to get your thoughts on aliens, space, why you love it so much, why it's the whole physics background to it.
Okay. Well, first, I think Barack Obama, like all president, they follow everyone, which is not completely crazy, right? And it's just the part of the social network promotion and stuff. So I do not know Barack Obama, but I think he's a really great president because he's very open, and he did read some interesting science fiction book. He's a science fiction fan, actually, and he read a book called The Three-Body Problem from Liu Cixin, which is a Chinese science fiction author, which is very, very famous in China, and with a lot of interesting physics and science-related questions. And in this book, there's an invasion towards Earth, and it's pretty interesting. But so yeah, but first, my interest into the UAP UFO is completely personal. Obviously, it's not something which is studied in universities, and there's still a stigma around this question. Um, my my interest into astronomy came from the chance to live in the mountain when I was younger. So I could open the door and I had access to a pure sky without light pollution. So I could see the Milky Way, you can see the shooting stars, you can see satellites crossing, and all the apparent motion. And when you have access to a pure sky like this, obviously you try to ask questions about what is our position. So at that time, I'm born in 1969, so it's a very long time ago. It's when the American when
You
went
look
to
great if you're born in 1969.
really. Thank you very much. But at that time, we didn't have access. I mean, we didn't have access to data, right, concerning UFO, UAP. Things like the X-File TV series became extremely popular in the 90s. And then this question became very related to pop culture, like Superman on Batman or whatever. And it became very difficult to decipher what was influence of pop culture and what was really a scientific phenomenon. So at that time, I lost interest into this question because it was nearly impossible to actually decipher what was true or not. So what is interesting with the report, the American report from June, is that they say they have data and they have multiple wavelength data about objects which are moving in ways which are not compatible with the way we understand science. And they have those there, I think they said, for more than 80 objects. they've got these things. But obviously, this is a preliminary report. We don't have access to the data because those sensors are probably classified, and they would reveal the capabilities of the American Army to measure such and such things. But the fact they also mentioned the stigma around this question, the fact they want more pilots to come and describe what they've seen, I think it's really positive for me, even if we don't have a big reveal. And my position on the UFO UAP phenomenon is I'm unsure about what it is. But it's exactly because I'm unsure about what it is that it is interesting. I'm pretty sure we are going to learn something interesting if we have the chance to investigate. And when you study science and physics, which is my initial training field, it became apparent that the physics field didn't really exploded in the last nearly century. We have two main theories, which are quantum mechanics and also relativity, which date from relativity is 1905, 1915. Quantum mechanics is 1925 for the Schrödinger equation with a cat. But those theories are not compatible together. So it wouldn't be very problematic, they're not compatible, if at least we would be able to explain enough of what we want to explain. Since nearly a century, we know there are problems in our understanding of the dynamic of large-scale structures. For example, the sun turns around our galaxy, the Milky Way, in a way that our galaxy shouldn't keep together. It should explode if you want. If it should collapse, well, go away if you want. Even in cluster of galaxies, it turns too fast, and we miss some of the mass that must be present to explain those motion. And if you look at large-scale structure of the universe, we see large scale. It's meaning a few billion light years. We see things like big walls or big filaments of a few billion light years scale. This is not compatible with the with what we know of our physics and our understanding of the universe. And this is going on for a very long time. And when I was a student in Master of Science, so that was in the 90s, they were already searching for this missing mass, which corresponds to 85% of the universe. And we still don't find it. And right now, the main theory is about astroparticles, which are heavy, but we don't see, and which nearly don't interact with matter. And actually, we've never been able to actually see a single interaction of those particles. So we are in a state where we can't really predict something, and we can't measure it either. So strangely, we come from a science where we rely on the scientific method, where we need to have a model and be able to measure and to make prediction with this model, to something that we have to believe like a church of faith. So that would be the church of dark matter or dark energy. So we need to investigate something different. Clearly, there's probably something important in our understanding that we need to understand in order to advance. Relativity and quantum mechanics are already something extremely crazy. When you think about the Schrödinger cat, which exists both alive and dead, when you think of time which flows differently depending on your referential, this was already something extremely crazy. But people like Albert Einstein, he didn't depend on the academics to survive, because he was a civil servant in a patent German office. And what he proposed wasn't obviously very accepted at the beginning. And what I find so interesting about Twitter, because you mentioned that you saw that had this hashtag UFO Twitter, is that a lot of researchers now, in fact, some fringe researchers who dare to go against the common paradigms which are accepted, don't find the possibility to do it in academia in general. And they do it on the fringe, and they connect through other means like YouTube, like Twitter. There are really interesting people that you can follow on Twitter. For example, there's a British scientist called Mike McCullough. I don't know if it's the right name, the right spelling, but he's got a theory of inertia called quantized inertia. He's got also a TEDx Plymouth video online. His idea, well, his theories, and he's got some financing from DARPA. DARPA is the military research organism from the States. He's got some financing there. And if all goes like you think it could work, it could mean a very different way to understand inertia, and therefore to have a complete and different understanding of the universe. And one of the consequence of this model is that we could travel much faster without the need for propellant, like using the vacuum energy, if you want. Because if you want to move quickly, what we know from physics is you can flap your wings, or you can go very fast with your wing open. And the idea is to have a difference of pressure between your wings, and then you will lift up. That's one way to fly. The other way is through propulsion. So you take some combustible with you and your engine. The other way is called MHD, magnetohydrodynamic. It's you create electromagnetic field around the vessels to create a vacuum in front of you, and you advanced. But even that magnetohydrodynamic wouldn't explain the cinematic, the trajectory that the pilot described for the Nimitz 204, for example, incidents. So there's maybe something different. And my take on this is I'm unsure. I'm not sure if, so I'm not a skeptic and I'm not a believer either. I know that we need to investigate into things we don't understand. And it could still be, for me, eventually something which could be Russian, Chinese, I'm unsure. It could be even a perception, a consciousness, or whatever thing that I don't know, I'm unsure. It could be also something which comes from another planet. I'm unsure either. But you say, I think you said somewhere that you played video games, right?
Yeah.
So did you play World of Warcraft?
Yeah.
Yeah, she did. Okay. I played in 208. 208, it was Wrath of the Lich King.
Yeah.
And I never played MMO, and I thought it was so fantastic, so intense, right? And the difficult part was the raids. That was difficult because you had to problem solve with different people, and it was 25 different people. And from sometimes you didn't advance at all, and you couldn't kill just one boss during the night. And even the raid leader said, okay, you understand all the strats, and say, yeah, no problem, we've got it. But when you said, when you took the risk to say, I'm unsure, could we maybe talk about it again? I realized that the next time we tried, the probability to actually solve the problem was much higher. And it was much higher because the people who actually dared to say, I'm unsure, can we maybe rethink about this together before trying again, is very low. So when you take the risk to say to the group, hey guys, maybe I'm bad because I'm unsure, you have a much better chance that people are going to change their behavior, and that we maybe are going to solve the problem. So my take on this, my behavior, if you want, is this.
first of all, thank you for doing my podcast, because you're the first person on UFO Twitter that I've been able to talk to without them saying something insane that has maybe be like I've asked the wrong person. Because that's the issue with UFO Twitter, is that like I want to understand more about the UFO stuff, because when people say there's aliens, I've talked to plenty of people that have had alien experiences, and some that were so far in episodes like about a year apart from each other, that don't know each other from different sides of the globe, that have had some type of weird appearance or occurrence or something that they can't really explain. But when it comes down to like science, for instance, people put science on the chopping block a lot, mostly because the fact that they backtrack a lot of things, like, oh, it turns out it could be this, or it turns out it could be that. I'm like, well, that's the whole point of science, is it's supposed to try and find an answer. And sadly, I feel like there are really no definitive answers in a lot of things. We're always constantly changing, or we're always constantly going around. That's the importance of it, is never having a finite conclusion, but always striving to see if there's something that you can change, or something that to find it at least as most accurate as possible. Now, with flat earthers, that's a whole different argument, because they just want to see like, nope, this is this is that, there's no other thing. Some people say space isn't real, which I try and understand their perspective. But when you really look at the thing of like dimensionals, like now we're researching into dimensions now, realizing there could be another dimension out there, where before we have never even thought of that 30, 40 years ago. It might have been an idea in a movie or a script or a book. And I look at it like, when I hit on UFO Twitter and I'm looking through, it's always somebody with a name that is nothing. It's just a bunch of coded secret messages like government conspiracy at Gmail or something. And then their profile picture is nothing. And I'm like, I want to have a discussion about this. I want to get your thoughts on it, because with all this UAP stuff, Australia released 1,700 articles about UAPs or unexplained phenomena. We only released like 9 something pages about it. And a lot of it was like really just kind of reiterating some basic points on to like continue on to page 2 to learn more about UAPs. And then it gives you a whole description of what UAPs are. Now go to page 3. I'm like, hang on a second. I'm expecting actual accounts of people that say they see something that they cannot explain. And my kind of thought is that it might be a form of technology that we have not really been released to us yet, something that is like in the works, or something that is way above what we usually see when it comes to like Thunderbirds or these giant jets that fly around. It might be a show off to another country or something like that, because the government is known to have equipment that's 20 years or 30 years advanced to what we have. I've studied Bob Lazar. I've heard the whole stories of, the unknown element, the what is it, 115 or something like that. He talks about. That's like this weird. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about.
Cesium or something, yeah.
So it leaves so much to question, because everyone's got a different view of it, which I think is important. That's the whole point of these scientific theories. That's the whole point of anything, is that you never want to have the same exact conclusion as somebody else. You should always have different perspectives brought in. I think a lot that happens to do with how maybe some of our systems are running is the fact that there's a lot of people in these systems that agree on the same things, but nobody ever brings in another perspective. It's just like having a bunch of yes men. I like it that there's so much diversity when it comes to this, because it leaves an open area for speculation and trying to figure out what's true. That's the whole point of science. Science is trying to classify something and understand something, but nobody really likes the answers.
Yeah, but exactly but the problem is this phenomenon is still not into the realm of science because of the stigma around it. And that's why we have.
I'm okay, by the way. I'm just choking and dying.
Okay.
Off
He's dead. That's why we've got this difficulty to actually bring into the table scientists. And if you look to people like Avi Loeb, do you know Avi Loeb?
Yeah.
So this guy has been the director of the Harvard Institute of Astrophysics for 9 years. He's got nearly 2,000 papers on his account. So
and no huge. Social media, none.
Yeah. Did you try? Okay, I didn't try. It's not at all.
Well, no. Oh, he was on a Joe Rogan podcast explaining that a lot of these other people that, because he wrote about the pencil like comet asteroid, that so like a comet apparently has ice on it. That's why you see like the tail and everything like that. Well, he was explaining this thing that was up in the sky that looked like a long pencil shape that might be from another planet. Everyone was trying to prove him wrong, but he had no social media to protect himself, so he had no way of getting this out there or trying to explain or defend himself. And that's what I know about him, like him trying to explain it on a podcast.
Yeah. But what is crazy, this guy is very well recognized. He's at the top of the game. And even him, because he dared to actually study this phenomenon, and he dared to actually even think that maybe it could be also alien, and we need to study it because it may be worth our time. Even there's a stigma. And so there are subjects which are difficult because I think all researchers kind of believe that there's life everywhere, because we know everywhere. When we know there's so billion of stars in each galaxy, and so many galaxy, and we found so many other planets around stars. But I saw an article of Paul Butler, which is an astronomer, who was one of the first to actually search for exoplanets. The first exoplanets been discovered in 1995. And before this time, he said that those researchers, which were on the finger of a hand, they actually lied.
Now.
Oh, there's more than 4,000 the exoplanets around other stars.
I was way off.
Yeah, and we will have much more when we will have the right instruments in orbits. But he explained that they didn't say on what they worked because it was seen as something shameful, because it's weird, right? So there are some subjects which are difficult simply to study in academics, because the scientific method works very well, I think. What doesn't work so well is what you have the right to study. And obviously, researchers are humans, and there's some influence mechanism. There are some people who are into the referee committee, so you have the right to publish in the right journal. If you say things which are against the current paradigm, is going to be difficult to publish. And that's why I see more and more researchers going through social media, like YouTube, like Twitter, to show what they're doing, and to gather other researchers, which are also kind of fringe researchers, and try to advance on the subject.
Well, it's so hard to imagine you study something for 40 years, you pass a paper, and then this is seen as what everybody's like, oh my God, this is the research that we're all going to go by. And then one person comes up with something in a matter of a year that discredits everything that you have gotten wrong. Instead of looking at it as like, okay, well, at least we'll be on the right track then. They look at it as an attack onto them. That's 40 years of their life that's going to be gone studying this one thing that turns out to be wrong. You know, it's seen as like a personal confrontation. That's what Avi Loeb was going on about all these people that were trying to discredit him. And he didn't have any social media to protect himself. It's because science kind of like a little bit of a competition in a way. Everybody's trying to get something named after them. Everybody's trying to get something published. Maybe not everybody, that might be a generalization, but he was talking about his issue with everybody coming at him. He had no social media to protect himself and no way to get this out. So whenever I would bring up a name, people would be like, well, that guy's known as like, he's wrong all the time. I'm like, well, actually, no, he's not. Just the way that you've heard, because you've heard through social media and you haven't heard from his perspective. You've only heard everybody discredit him. So then it's like creating a conspiracy theorist or something.
Yeah. The most of the researchers believe, or astronomers believe, that you can't really cross the distance between the stars, because it's obviously far away, 4 light years for the first the star near the sun, Proxima Centauri. But in fact, it is not that far away. Because if you take into account, obviously, the space is not a place for humans, because it's extremely not compatible with the way we live. And even if you want to sustain people on the International Space Station, you have so many people on ground fixing so many problems every day to keep all those people up there alive. But if we go back to the idea that we don't have a complete understanding of physics, and that maybe there are other ways to actually move and to cross large distances. You talked just before about interdimension. There's a French researcher called JeanPierre Petty, and he has a theory called Janus, Janus theory, where it's a model of 2 dimensions. There's 2 universes, one with positive mass and one with negative mass. And in his theory, which is published in a paper, he said that if it works, you could actually pop up in the other dimension and travel much faster than the speed of light and come back. The problem is no normal astronomer wants to study that and to confirm or infirm what he's saying, because it would be too dangerous for your repetition. So we come back to the idea that we need to remove the stigma and to be allowed to study things which are a little crazy, because quantum mechanics is completely crazy. Relativity is completely crazy. So why can't we have the right to study hypotheses or theories which maybe will lead to a new important paradigm that we missed in our understanding? And it's currently the challenge to do that. So the fact that the US said we maybe will need new science understanding on that, and that we really want to change the stigma around this subject, that we go as far as to say we don't want to use UFO as a term, because the movies and the TV series are all around this vocabulary. So maybe we'll use something else to remove the stigma. I think it's a great idea. I think it's super important. I've seen a neuroscientist on YouTube who studied social pain. In fact, he studied the influence of rejection on your brain. And he shows in the TED video, the research is done, and he invited 3 people, and he said, okay, you're going to play together. You're going to throw the ball to each other. But he said to 2 of them, he said, after a while, you don't give the ball anymore to the 3rd one, okay? And we're going to measure your brain. We're going to see exactly how it works. And in their imagery of the brain, they see that when you are rejected from the group, the status of your brain is exactly when you have a physical injury. It's exactly the same perception as a physical injury. And you can go as far as to treat it with the medicine you take when you have actually a physical injury. So the social pain of rejection is something that human, because we are social animals, we can't go far along, we can't sustain for a long time the fact to be rejected. And that's why I think those important science and new ways to research things haven't been done. And that's why physics is probably one of the science we didn't improve so fast like the other sciences did over the last decades.
Because it's so hard, because we need to see something to know what it is. I mean, that's the whole concept, like seeing is believing, for instance.
Yeah.
Oh, an interesting study that I researched. You ever heard of the placebo effect, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a thing called the nocebo effect. And what actually happened was they actually looked at autopsies of corpses that had been diagnosed with like a certain type of cancer, which they did an autopsy, realized the cancer is benign, but the body had been given such a drastic type of diagnosis that they started experiencing symptoms of actual cancer, from hair falling out to, needing chemo or things of that sort. And they realized that even something so powerful as a diagnosis, if I told you right now you had a life-threatening disease and only a month left to live, you're going to start getting up into your head. And then next, you're convincing yourself. I mean, we know people that can brainwash themselves on a concept of like imprinting false memories, things of like, I remember doing that. You've never been to Tahiti. You've never been. Well, I went in 2004. Where are the photos? Well, I don't have any photos because you weren't there. You somehow convinced yourself. This is where schizophrenia and all these types of things start to come in, which I think is my fascination is with the human mind, of what everybody's perspective of how they're developing their thoughts and how it got there, and also like how far it can really be pushed. But with space, for instance, that might be out of my realm. But when you start examining like why I like the human mind so much, is because if you put a bunch of people that think differently trying to study what quantum physics is, or trying to study what space is, maybe they don't have a certain area of degree, but it's a bunch of different perspectives. And you start to realize everybody's got a different insight to help each other get to what might be a good possible answer, a good conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem of science too, and academia. Academia, for a reason of practicability, developed as separate sciences. So you have biology studying things alive. You've got chemistry studying the change of matter through reaction of molecules and atoms. You have physics, which is underlying a lot of them. But all this has been separated because it's just easier to classify that and then to advance. But then what we need now is to be able to fill the gap between the sciences we have, because science is not a collection of sciences. Everything is connected together. And in academia, they talk a lot, for a long time, they've been talking about interdisciplinarity and pluridisciplinarity. But in reality, the mechanism of influence on the culture is very into each faculty, right? And our culture is very much a culture of speciality. If you look at the Renaissance period, so if you look at De Vinci, for example, this guy was an engineer, he was an artist, he was a scientist, and so on. And the accepted culture of what was expected of you at this period of time is to have a very horizontal profile. Obviously, it was much easier at the time because there was much less knowledge to actually understand. And when the analytical culture came around René Descartes and the Cartesian way of thinking, you had really to specialize yourself to be considered as something worthy. And I think, and you can even find it in some expressions. So for example, you probably know the expression, Jack of all trades, master of none. It is a negative expression. You say, this guy, he touched everything, so he's bad. But before this expression, it was, I don't remember which century it was, but it was Jack of all trades. And then it transformed into Jack of all trades, master of none. So it was a positive expression. So I think we need both. And I think we need obviously specialists, but it would be great to have also generalist people who are able to connect the dots between different parts far away. It would probably be great too to have people with some T-shapes profile, people who are good specialists, but we know enough around their specialty to make a connection. But right now, we are still very much into these hyper-specialized profile. And then it's even a problem for other subject, because everybody is specialized, it's never your fault, right? Because you don't want to look at the problem globally. You're just responsible for one part of the problem. And maybe that's why we are today with the big problem like the climate problem, like the biodiversity destruction and everything. And we have problem to actually move because it's not a problem. I'm specialized in something and I'm not trained or interested to try to see the problem as a whole. But what you said is exactly that. We need people from different backgrounds to work together. And currently, my understanding from what I see in my university, even if it is probably an intention, I don't think it works very well. And that's why some of researchers begin to use social media as a way to connect with other background or other ideas. And I'm interested into that because what is powerful with us is the fact we are social animals. We are so weak alone. We have the impression we're very strong because we see American movies and we have the impression we can be individuals, which are disconnected from everyone. But in fact, we are completely dependent of other people. And what we need is to be able to tap into collective intelligence, the fact we have all this different knowledge together and all these different experience. So one thing I like to learn, in my university, there are 50,000 students coming from all the countries and with all languages. So one of the hobby I had was to learn about new cultures and also new languages. So I did a little some Mandarin and some Japanese. And what is great when you talk with someone which is not from your culture, so you exchange about how was life in your country? How do you see that? And then you realize that what you thought was universal, some parts were actually cultural. And that those people, I don't see the same thing at all. And the only way for you to decipher what is cultural, universal, and personal into your way of seeing the world is to interact with other cultures.
It's kind of
Otherwise, everything is universal.
Well, it's kind of like my idea of religion, for instance. I'm not a religious person, but what I say is every religion seems like they have a piece of the same puzzle. You know, we're all meant on this earth, for instance, is to communicate. But for sure, after a while, you kind of want to distance yourself and have your personal space. 100%. But through talking with so many people, I'll have one scientist on, they'll talk about a whole bunch of things. And I'm like, well, did you see from this perspective? It's like, I never really saw it from that because I don't study that. It's like, that's kind of the whole point, is we're all supposed to be working together to strive for better rather than tearing each other apart or just sticking with our own views. You know, jack of all trade, master of none might seem like a horrible thing to somebody, but I've heard a lot of people use it as a compliment. It means they're good at everything. Now, I don't know a specific field or an area of research, but I've talked to a lot of people to be able to manage a conversation in each one of these fields, from underwater archaeology to you name it. I've talked to it. And it's because it's trying to grasp a firm understanding, because I think as people, it's way easier to try and understand something if you take a little bit of everything. I mean, we want everything, a little bit of everything all of the time. But when it comes to certain things, a lot of people are now sticking to niche groups rather than branching out and trying to discover more, get another perspective on things. We're basically shooting ourselves in the foot in a way. You know, we always backtrack, or we always go forward and then we're backtracking again, going back. And I'm like, we're never going to see a whole lot of progress unless we can really get on the same page of just trying to understand and not dismiss, but be open to kind of all of it.
Exactly. And also we need to experiment things. Everybody knows about quantum mechanics and relativity. In the 70s, there's another field of science with that very few people know about. Do you know what it is in the 70s?
I'm going to guess. I don't know. We were big in cocaine in the 70s.
Okay. Because the name is not sexy at all. And it's called complex systems. Okay. Did you heard about complex systems?
I've heard of it.
When you study physics, you have the impression first that you will be able to put everything into equation. And in fact, we can put things into equation and then predict the system, but only for simple systems or on systems where we can approximate some of the things. But imagine that, and that's the theme of the three-body problem, the Chinese science sci-fi. Imagine that you want to study a star system with three suns of three stars. Only three elements, right? You can't even put that into equation. You can only know the result by actually going through the experience. So we need to make experiments. We can't put everything into equation. And the universe of brain or body is very complex. There's more than three elements. And there's this concept of emergence, which happened. For example, one of the systems which have been studied in the 70s are ant hills. You know the ants?
Yeah.
Ant hills. And the researcher thought, well, this is very efficient. This is very organized. There's a nursery, there are soldiers, there's people ants searching for food and so on. So they imagined that maybe it is organized by a queen. The queen is architect. The queen gives the order. But in fact, they realized that no, there's no top-down system. The queen is not the architect. They didn't find any architect. And in fact, the system emerged and self-organized itself from top down only because there is critical mass of members, but also because there's a system of communication which is open to everyone, which come across other ants. For example, there's a pheromone saying, well, I've found food in there and I'm doing this. And then the other ants can actually adapt themselves. And there's this complex of emergence, so something which self-organized and which become visible and efficient, but which wasn't into the system at the beginning. So, for example, if you take a gas, so you've got air, going very quickly in all direction. If you interview the molecule, they will say, well, I'm going into this direction with this speed. But because you've got enough of them, you have something else which appears at a bigger scale, which is pressure, which is something which is not visible at the scale of the individual molecule. If you ask a blood cell, what you're doing in life? Well, I'm taking iron and I move and I give my iron to other cells, but they can't see that they are useful at a bigger scale. And maybe for us, maybe we are part of a complex system. Maybe we have a usefulness at a bigger stage of complexity that we maybe don't see and yet, or don't understand yet, and maybe we won't ever be able to understand it if it is the case, or if something like that should appear later. If you study astrophysics, there's a book which is well known called A Brief History of Time from Stephen Hawking. What is interesting into astronomy is you can look at the sky, and the further away you look, the further you look in the past. So the moon, you can see it as it was 1 second away, the sun as it was 8 minutes away. And you can go there until 13.5 billion years ago. And that was the Big Bang. So we can see the story of the universe. And the story of the universe is pretty simple. It's the complexification of matter, the complexification of the entities which are inside this universe. So if you look at the Big Bang, it was very simple. It was a soup of primitive particles with proton, electron. And then if you wait a little, you've got the electron who say, well, I'm negative mass, and whoa, you are positive. I like positive. Maybe we could do something together, right? And then you've got hydrogen. Okay, cool. We are more complex than before. We are an atom of hydrogen. And then through gravity, you've got condensation. These going together. And with the gravity increasing, you've got more friction, and then you have fusion, which can happen between two hydrogen. And then you've got a more complex element, which is helium, with 2 electrons and 2 protons. And then if you wait again, you will see the stars which live their life because they transform the hydrogen into helium. And at the end of their life, if they're big enough, they're going to create other elements like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen. And if you wait again, maybe that on a planet which was a result of a Death Star before, maybe you will have complex cells and maybe multicellular organism, and maybe us talking about what are we doing here together in this universe. But it's really the emergence of something which is more and more complex, but complex in a good sense, in the way of what we can do, and we can today think about this universe itself.
First of all, you're blowing my mind because I thought God created the universe in 6 days, then on the 7th he rested. Oh, no, just kidding. I had to. I look at it like, back to what you were saying about like kind of like the community aspect of things too. I mean, the concept of like, we always look at like one person, like you were saying, like the queen, and you start to realize it's the ants that are working together. We look at one person that's going to be able to decipher this or discover this, when we realize we all might play a piece into the big picture of things. I mean, we always look for one problem when something goes wrong instead of looking at a multiple occurrence or a chain reaction of a bunch of different things going wrong. That's kind of like the biggest issue, is there always has to be one thing. Like when a fire happens, this is what started the fire. It's like, how do you know that started the fire? Shouldn't you look for multiple different conclusions? You start to realize there's more problems that could have been the cause of it, rather than just one thing that is obviously the most obvious, you know?
Yeah. It's much more complex than we believe, and also our perception of reality is very incomplete too. I mean, we don't have access to reality. We can see things around us. We have the impression it's real because I can grab the object, but we know that another animal would see in different wavelengths. And we know that what we see is also interpreted by a brain. So we never have this direct access to reality, and it's make things even more complex. That's the if you go back to science fiction, it's the obsession of Philip K. Dick, the science fiction American author, and on what is reality. And also to go back to an expression you said you need to see it to believe it. And I went to a conference in France of social, I think it's anthropology,
Mm-hmm.
or ethnology too. And he said that you need to see it to believe it. But the guy said, and he was very famous in France, he's a big boss. And he said, well, maybe the opposite, the reverse is also true. You need to believe it to see it. And he gave an example that we can't prove, but he said that maybe there's been some testimony, maybe, so I'm really not sure, but that maybe the Native American Indian, maybe they didn't see the big ships coming from the Portuguese. They saw the little ship because they believed little ships could be, the little boat could exist. But because we filtering what we see, if you really believe something don't exist, there's no reason for your brain to actually put it into your frame of view.
There's a old study you can look up on YouTube, and it's basically a bunch of people in a circle walking around or playing basketball, and then it ends, and then it stops, and it says, "But did you see the gorilla?" And then
Ah,
you
yeah,
didn't notice
I saw
the
that.
gorilla walking through. I was like, I
Yeah,
have to rewind to
yeah,
make sure they didn't add that in there. But it's true. It's like you only they kind of dangle something in front of you, and you don't notice everything around you. It's kind of being aware of your surroundings. It's so difficult to do, but there are some people who have maybe lived in a bad neighborhood, had a horrible experience or something, but they notice about their neighborhood when something's off. Like there's a car that's been parked down the street for a long time. It's like, how do you know? It's like, because they're aware of their surroundings. A lot of people are not aware. Hell, half the time people walk out in the street without looking both ways. Nobody cares. It's just like you start to realize there's an importance to observing the things around you when you truly take a second to stop and realize the moment that you're in, the time that you're experiencing right now, and you start to examine things like the trees are moving in such a way. Like this stuff is unexplainable on the concept of, like, people always chalk it up to God. I don't know what it is, but it's something that's so fascinating, and it makes your mind start to ticker back and forth of what it possibly could be, because it's so breathtaking at times, like the like Mount Everest or some type of peak or some type of sunrise or sunset. It's so breathtaking in that moment where no thought should be running in through your head, because you should be examining the moment that is happening right in front of you. And then even if you want to speculate upon what that is, it's a concept where you hear people with flat earth ideas. I've heard everything under the sun. To birds aren't real, space isn't real, dinosaurs never existed. I understand their perspective of it. I don't, but I think that's the only thing we really can do is try and understand each other's perspectives and uncover and ask the questions. Everybody wants to relate on their similarities. And I think the strongest thing that's going to unite us even more is that if we relate on our differences in things, the fact that you think something different than me, that creates a conversation, that creates a perspectival understanding of how this person came to this conclusion. It's not about what you believe, it's about trying to see how this person believes it, and they should be doing the same to you, which creates an engaging conversation that overall leads to a community that's going to see more growth than the one that we've been running on for so long.
exactly. Yeah, so I agree. And we go back to the idea to go away from time to time from your culture, which could be professional culture for the researchers. And when I work in the planetarium for 6 years, what I was surprised is the natural state of humans. They are all curious, and they are all scientific and artistic, because all kids, when you put them in a planetarium in front of a night sky, they all have scientific questions. Why the sky is blue? I add some questions like why the planet are square, around and not square. This is a very powerful question that adults can't ask anymore. They've got very candid, powerful, meaningful question because they don't have a pre-imposed culture on them. it is still virgin, if you want. And I remember Steve Jobs saying that one of the stronger innovations is death, because then you're obliged to go back from the beginning with a blank page in order to be able to see things differently.
I guess that's one of the benefits of not paying attention in school, is that I have no information in my head that I'm biased to. I'm open to everything.
Yeah. Well, some people that we call the kid spirit, they are able to keep their childhood curiosity, but it's not a lot of them who do that. Me, I've been able to do that. I mean, my leisure time, it's about learning new things, because I enjoy the process of learning new things. And when I learn new things, I'm really like a kid. I love it. But it's not something. It's not something you see frequently into adults. But to come back to the idea of the planetarium, so the adults don't ask those powerful, simple questions, spontaneous questions. When they ask questions they know the result of. So it's very specialized questions about something. But strangely, I saw some retired people, old people, who have, again, the same behavior as kids. And they don't give a damn about what people are going to think, even if they ask something stupid and simple, because they just want to ask the question. So we go back to this little problem of not shaming people to go back into stupid way to look at things and to ask a very, very candid question. So if you go back into the idea of social media and Twitter and so on, there's another things which is happening now, which is open science and citizen science. The idea to ask researchers and institutions to give their data available to everyone who want to do something with it, especially if there's been some financing coming from the States. So me, I do expect new circle of thinking, but more outside of the institution. And what you're doing here, for example, talking to people about something which interests you, it's beginning more and more trending, I think, on YouTube. When you see Lex Friedman, when you see the theory of everything, and there are such interesting questions with interaction and stuff. I'm hopeful that if we increase our ability to connect through cultures, for example, we live at the opposite side of the planet, right?
Yeah.
And we can easily connect and exchange information and ideas. And if you also have access
and you don't call me an idiot, I love it. Thank you.
Really, they call you no. But I think the idiot way of thinking is I think is the most powerful, because that's why you come with really different things. I've read an article that I didn't find back. It was about Philip K. Dick. How did he come with such crazy idea and powerful ideas? And he said that he was playing the stupid game. So not the idiot game, but the stupid game. So what he did is he took something that everybody believes is right, and then he tried to advocate for it to be wrong. So he took the opposite that everybody believe. And by doing so, if what you're thinking about being right is actually right, you can't find a lot of arguments to keep it sticky. But if you find arguments that, in fact, it's not dying straight away, maybe there is something which is sticky. And in a world we change very quickly, maybe there are things we believe that was true that we don't put into question anymore because it was true in the past. And to have this stupid game is actually something which is interesting. And I try to do that, me. I try to take something really stupid and try to see if it's something interesting would come.
Okay, decipher my podcast.
That's not something stupid. That's a goal.
I try.
Your podcast is about. I think your podcast is about connection. and understanding, exchanging. And if you look at, well, if you look at, I don't know if you know Renee Brown, she's a researcher into the field of, she made a video called "The Power of Vulnerability," and she interviewed successful people who actually had a big contribution. And she said that in all her research, what's come back always is that if there is a meaning to what we do, it is connection. And if you look at the story of the universe, it's also about connection. Particle, electron, like well, you've got the connection between the plus and the minus, yeah. And it's everything about relation. So let's imagine, what if our universe is about increasing our connection and relation? Then maybe into this idea, we should also try to connect with other life forms if they exist, and if they advance enough. And you could say, well, we did try that, nothing happened. But let's go back to what we tried yet. With the SETI program, what has been tried is mainly looking at radio waves. And radio waves, well, we did use radio waves, but do we communicate together with radio waves? No, we don't. We use fiber optics or cable. And so we have no idea if we would use radio wave for a very long time. And also, if you use radio wave, would you really, as an intelligent civilization, give and broadcast your home position planet to everyone in the universe?
Which we did.
Yeah, which we did. I mean, this is not intelligent. This is called suicidal civilization. Guys, we did find that there's no suicidal civilization in proximity of Earth. I think that's a pretty good result. I'm very happy not to have a conversation with suicidal civilizations. So yeah, and even the radio signal, radio source decrease in the square of the distance of the emission. So it decreased very quickly. So it's not surprising. I mean, we didn't find anything. And there's also some papers which try to understand how we would ourselves colonize the galaxy if you wanted to. And we would probably do it through probes, like we do on Mars with the rovers and the helicopters. Because if you look at the lifetime of our galaxy, it would take a fraction of the lifetime of our galaxy to actually colonize and send probe away. So maybe what we see could be probes coming from other systems, but not necessarily something which would be biological. And when we see the advance we have in AI, we could imagine that this could go into probes. So there's so many possibilities. And because there's so many possibilities, it's so exciting to study. But we're still into this stigma, these strange things about the X-Files, the ET. So we need to break that. And I think that general citizens and because one of the reasons I really like technology is that it gives a voice to anyone, which didn't happen before. In 2005, the podcasts were popular. Everybody could have his own journal. And before, it was super expensive to have your own journal. In 2005, and especially 2004, there was the podcast phenomenon, the idea that you can have your own radio. And that was only amateur at the beginning. No professional was there. The BBC was one of the first to use it after the amateurs. In 2005, it was YouTube. And YouTube is now ProTube. YouTube is your mother, your grandmom, have our tube, our TV channel. And 205 is also 204, 205 is also the social network like Facebook, and everybody has their own communication channel towards billions of potential user. So we have a kind of connection channel now, which is very different from the publication of science, and we can really connect to everyone. Everyone can have a voice, and if we can connect better with data, open science, and everything, we maybe find something interesting. And to go back into astronomy, when I studied astronomy, I was surprised that the amateur, astronomer amateur, were actually quite big in astronomy, and they're still big. Why? Because there are much more amateurs in astronomy than there are professional. They have much more instruments, but not as big and not as powerful as professional. But they scan the sky with much more people. There is a lot of supernova or even comets which have have the name of amateurs because they were the first to actually see it and actually give this information to professionals which could study it in a more scientific way, and especially with more better and specialized instruments. So there's this idea of the rise of amateur, but which can have a very positive influence on professional. And some people use the term pro-am for professional and amateur in the same way. And I do wish that more people would realize that they can actually contribute something interesting and useful to everyone, right? But because we have those tools. And because I remember a time where the internet didn't exist. And what happened when the internet didn't exist? I was waiting at the beginning of each month. I went to a place where you could buy magazines, and you could find information at the pulse of a monthly pulse, right? On some magazine, you could actually contribute, especially in computing. You could write your program and send it to the magazine. But you also had to wait for a few months before it's published. And if you saw a bug into your program, you had to wait even more, right, for correction to come. And I think young people don't realize the chance we have and how crazy this capability to exchange and to organize and to work together and to play together and to advance together.
Dude, you're awesome. I'm glad someone agrees on the community aspect of things, man. Dude, I'd love to have you back on the show if you want to come back on, dude. It's been a great freaking conversation with you, man. I can't thank you enough for even giving me the time. I mean, I know I was all about it when you were joining. I was like, I gotta ask him about Barack Obama. But dude, seriously, it's especially like making it into a form where I can understand it, giving me the time, like just a regular person that wants to try and understand a little bit more too and learn too. And especially anybody out there listening that wants to learn and at least try and understand. I know I'm gonna have to replay this a couple of times just so I can process everything that you said, because I'm still like, I just need a cigarette right now. But you've given me so much of your time, man. I really appreciate it. Is there anything where people can find you on? Hopefully going to get you back on again if you want to come back on and chat.
Well, I'm like you said, I'm on Twitter. I don't even remember my my nickname there. And also I have a YouTube channel, but it's mostly about data science and programming. But I will maybe try to make videos about UAP.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure I link your Twitter and I'll link your YouTube channel into the links too, so people can see that. I'm pretty sure I might bring that up the next time if you want to come back on. But dude, it's been great chatting with you, man. Seriously, is there anything you want to let anybody out there listening to know?
No, well, thank you so much for inviting me. I was surprised when you sent me the stuff, and especially as I'm French, I'm saying, well, good. I'm going to, I really enjoyed it. And I didn't feel very comfortable to do an interview because I'm not used to that. But because I think the subject is interesting and important, and I think we should dare more, right, to even expose ourselves, because when you do that, you expose also yourself, right? You're recorded, you've got your face online, and so on. It's not that easy, right? It's not people believe that YouTubers are narcissistic people, but it's very rarely the case. They feel that they have something to share, and I think we all have a different experience of life and of this universe, and the best thing I think we can do is to share it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree anymore. I mean, I'm not a big guy for camera, and then I just did it because it makes YouTube listeners or anybody watching feel a little bit more whole, like they're sitting in a conversation. So I'm more than willing to do that to learn. I'm talking to someone important like yourself. I mean, given
I'm
all
not
this,
important.
you are
I'm
very
not
important.
important.
Everyone is important in their
No.
own way.
Yeah, everyone is important. I mean, history is not the history of important people. History is the history of everyone. And if you want to win a war, it's not the history of the commander, right? I mean, everyone's got a part in the history. Everything is connected. So everyone is we can't, everyone is part of the equation, even if there's maybe no equation. but,
Well,
uh,
I'll about to say, I'll make sure I link everything in the description. I appreciate you for doing the podcast, and thanks for listening to this episode Out of the Blank podcast.